What's going on, poker fam? We are back with another video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. But this is going to detail the long downswing that I was on. And although it wasn't actually that long, it was only about a 2-week downswing. I played almost every day in those 2 weeks, and it was pretty disastrous in so many ways. So this is part one of the disaster. Stay tuned for part two, which will come out in a few days after this. So I'll give more thoughts about how I'm feeling about the downswing towards the end of this video, but I'm gonna get right into the hands and let's show what happens when a poker pro goes on a downswing. So we are in middle position. We decided to raise it up to $10 with ace-9 of diamonds. It's a pretty small raise than I normally would do, but hey, this is the raise size that I chose. So we get called by the button and the big blind. So we are off to a flop, which comes king, queen, 6 with 2 diamonds. So of course I'm going to bet, but actually the big blind decides to donk out a pretty large bet of $30. That is a pot-sized bet. But obviously having an overcard and a diamond flush draw, I'm never going to go anywhere. So I decide to stick in the call in the button fold. So now we're heads up to the turn, which is the 4 of diamonds, giving us the stone cold nuts. And so now the donk unfortunately decides to check. And when I think about what bet sizing I want to use, I don't want to go too large because it seems like that diamond scared him. So I put out a smaller bet of $40, and he actually shows that he folded ace-king. Now, why he didn't 3-bet with ace-king, I don't know. But he had ace-king, and he made a really, really crazy fold. Applaud to him. But we are moving on to the next hand. It's always good to win the first one. So what's better than having one ace? Yep, you got that right. We have 2 aces, pocket aces in the big blind. There are 5 limps. So when it gets to me, I'm going to raise this up a lot larger than $15. I bumped this thing up to $25, and that accomplishes just what I want, is only the under the gun limper and the button decide to call. So going through ways to a flop with aces is not the worst case scenario. Only thing is I am out of position to both players. But it is what it is. We'll try to navigate, and we are off to a not so great flop. It is 7, 9, 10 with 2 clubs and 1 spade. I do have 2 black aces, so if it goes runner, runner, flush, I will have the best hand. But however, being as that I have 2 players behind me, that I decide to check. And when I check, the under the gun player decides to put out a bet of $25. And when the button folds, I could be putting a check raise, maybe trying to turn my ace of clubs into a bluff, but I think on this board, the field is going to have a lot more strong hands here than I will, all of the 2 pair plus straight draw combinations. So with that being said, I just decided to call, and we are off to a turn, which is a 4, which is a really great card because there's not going to be any hand that he has that's going to improve with this 4. So I'm feeling pretty good about my hand. So when I check, he decides to put out a bet of $40. And for this price, I think that he's not putting on a lot of aggression, but he is saying that he has something. So I just decided to call as well. And now we're going to the river, which is the king of clubs. Now this does bring in the club flush draw, but I am blocking that with the ace of clubs. So depending on what he wants to do on the river will depend on what I want to do. I could turn my hand into a bluff. But when I check, he actually quickly checks back, and I just decide to turn over my aces. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if he had 2 pair, because a lot of people just get scared at 1-3 when they see the third of a flush come in. So I show my hand, and it actually is good, and that's a pretty big pot to win with pocket aces on this type of board. But I'm happy to win it, and we are moving on to the next hand. Let's go. So everyone loves aces, but for me, my favorite pocket pair that's not a premium is actually pocket 10. So that's what we have, and we decided to raise it up to $20. And the small blind, big blind, and the button all decide to call. So we're going 4 ways to a flop, and it actually comes out about as good as you can hope for without hitting a set. It is 7-3 deuce. It does have 2 spades out there, but I do have the 10 of spades in case it does become relevant. So now when it checks to me, I decided to go for a half pot, and to be honest with you, on a board like this, I could actually go a lot larger. Having an overpair here, I'm allowed to go 50 or even close to pot. So all that being said, I decided on a bet of $30, and only the big blind decides to call. Now the turn is a king of spades, so I'm not exactly loving it because it does bring in the flush, but I am going to still have all of the ace kings, king queen, stuff like that might want to float. So of course I'm going to bet here, and I decided to put out a bet of $70, really trying to get value from maybe smaller hands that might have a spade. But sometimes I think I could check here being that it was so multi-way. But obviously if I get raised, I know I can just fold. Um, I don't really exactly like this line because I don't really even know what I want to accomplish here. I don't know if I want them to fold or if I want him to call. And actually, I was leaning towards wanting him to put in the fold. So I don't know if turning 10 into a bluff is exactly the best line, but that's what I decided to do. And it's $70 bet. He does think for a while, but actually does end up calling. So now we're going off to a river, which is a pretty bad card. It is the ace of diamond. Reading that this is a bad card because now I know that he could still have the ace high flush draw, because if the ace was a spade, then I probably would have went for one more street of value, thinking that there's a good chance that he might just have a random smaller spade. But being that the ace of diamonds is there, he can have the ace of spade flush. It's kind of like a bad situation for me. So I decided to check, and he rips it all in, and I have about 300 and something dollars in my stack. So with all that being said, there's just no way I can call because you got to think about his line. It is check, call, a big bet on the turn, and then when I check to him, he goes all in for $350 on the river. Yeah, that's almost never a bluff, especially in 1-3. And so I decided to fold pretty quickly, and he was nice enough to show that he had ace queen of spades. So he actually had a monster hand and was a pretty much a 0% chance of me getting him to fold on the flop if I would have bet more. I probably could have checked back on the turn perhaps, but at the end of the day, I'm just glad that he made it very easy for me to fold on the river, because if he would have put out maybe a blocker size bet, I would have had to call there. So anyways, we got to take the loss and move on, and let's go. So in this hand, we have king, queen of diamonds, and I decided to raise it up to $15 under the gun. We get the next act player to call. The big blind calls when we were off to a flop, which is ace jack 6 with 1 diamond. So we have a gut shot to Broadway. Also, we have backdoor diamonds. And I think I have the range advantage. So I decided to put out a bet of $20, and they both decide to call. The turn is a 9. Unfortunately, it's not a diamond, and it does check all the way around. I don't see what the point is in betting here. And I decide to check, and it checks all the way around. So we're off to a river, which is the king. And now because nobody bet on the turn, I think that it's a good chance I could have the best hand. However, I just decided to check, and when it checks around, the big blind has king jack for 2 pair, and I don't know, I guess they were scared of somebody else having a better 2 pair or a straight. So either way, that is that hand, and we're off to the next one. So we have king jack off in a hijack, and obviously I'm in later positions, so I do decide to raise, but this is not really a good hand to call with. But when you're at a 1-3 table that's passive and you're the aggressor, king jack can be a decent hand to try to just get the lead and get money off of these weak players. So we raise it up to 15, and we only get one call, and we are off to a flop, which is 10-7-5. So I decided to put out a C bet to $15, and he decides to stick in the call. The turn is a 7, pairing the board, and when he checks, I decide that if he has a 10, he's not going to fold on this turn card, and if he has a 7, which is quite possible, he now has trips, and this would be ugly. So I check back, and we are off to the river, which is a king. So normally you would think that he might check it to me because it smashes my range, but before he even checks, he just decides to fold his hand. So we win. I guess he knew I had a king, but whatever, we win the pot. On to the next one. So for this hand, I decide to raise king jack off in the hijack. We raise it up to $15, and we get 2 callers. Now we're off to a flop, which is 9, 6, 10, and the small blind decides to lead out for $10. Well, having a gut shot and 2 overcards, I do decide to put in the call. And the turn is a king, and now when he checks to me, I bet out for $30, and we are off to a river, but the river doesn't even matter because he mucks as soon as he sees it. So that's the end of that hand. You see some weird stuff in 1-3, but once again, we do win this pot, and we're taking all W's right now. So let's go. So quick intermission. I just want to say that I have met close to 100 people since starting this vlog that have came up to me and said that they support my videos. I definitely appreciate all of you. The problem is I've only been able to play with maybe 8 to 10, meaning because at MGM and Maryland Live, sometimes it's hard to get on the same table. So if you want to guarantee a chance to play alongside of me, if that's something for you, I play on an online app called Poker 2. If you want to get into the game, there's definitely going to be first time player bonuses. Just let me know and I'll get you set up. And it's tons of action, plenty of whales. I'm sharing a couple hands just to show you that people don't know what they're doing in these games, and there's tons of money to be won. So just shoot me a text, shoot me a telegram, and I will get you into the game. But we're right back to the video. I appreciate your time. I know I was just talking about how King Jack is not really a hand you should play, and here I am on the button with King 10 offsuit. But when you're on the button, these trashy hands are ones that you're supposed to be raising, trying to get the small blind and big blind to fold, and also maybe squeeze out the dead money. And this hand is decent against a bunch of limping ranges. So at this point, I decided to raise it up to 15, and I only get the big blind to defend. Now, we are off to a flop, which is 8-9 jack, which is actually a pretty good flop because if a queen comes and he has a 10, I am going to super cooler them because they will have the straight, but I will have the nut straight and I'll be winning a whole bunch of money. So anyways, I bet out for $15 and our opponent decides to stick in the call. The turn is a 5, and I think this is where I make the mistake. I think this is where I should be putting in a very large bet, maybe to the tune of $50 to $60, really trying to put the pressure if he has, let's say, a one pair hand. But I just decided to check, and when the river is a deuce, he puts out a small bet of $25, and obviously, I don't think that me raising on this card is going to make any sense, so I just decided to give it up and fold. But I don't like the fact that I let go of my aggression on the turn. I think I should have put out a big bet. But let me know in the comments what you think I should have done. If you think I should have checked, then that's fine because they could have a lot of strong hands on this board. Or if you think that I should just put max pressure on some of his weaker holdings, and just let me know. Okay, so in this hand, we're sitting here with King 10, and we decide to raise it up to $15 for middle position. Only the cutoff decides to call, and we are off to a flop, which is King, Ace, Ace. Pretty good flop unless they have a random ace, which is possible, but I decide to check, and it checks all the way around. So when the turn is a 7, at this point, I'm not really scared of any card. I mean, I guess sometimes they could have a pocket pair and it hits and they boat up. But as long as they don't have an ace, I'm not really worried about anything. I stand to have the best hand more times than not. So I let it check around one more time, and we see a river, which is the 9 of clubs. So now I just decided to go for a little small bet of $10, and I get a call. Obviously, my hand is the best here when they just call. So we win the pot, but now we are off to the next hand. So here we are with pocket 8. There's an under the gun raise to $10. The cutoff calls. And here I am in the small blind. I think this is a good spot for me to put in a 3 bet. However, I just get gun shy here and I need to be more aggressive in these spots. But I just decided to call the $10. But at this point, the problem with me calling is I'm basically just turning my pocket 8s into a bluff catcher. If I were to 3 bet and I have the range advantage, there's a lot more I could do with this hand. So anyways, we're off to a flop, which is 10, 5, 7. And I check and it checks all the way around. And the turn is a 9, and now I decide to put out a bet of $20, and the under the gun player decides to fold, and the cutoff decides to call. So now we're off to a river, which is another 9. I don't think that our opponent would have a 9 here a lot for trips, but it is possible that they have a 10. So I just think that my hand is a good hand to get to showdown with at this point. And when I check, she quickly checks back, but she actually has ace 10. So if I would have bet, she's definitely going to call. But I think that if I would have put in a 3 bet, I would have just took down the whole pot right then and there. So that's what being more aggressive does in poker. You don't got to get into some of these spots on trying to know if your hand is good or not. But either way, we got to shake that off and move on to the next hand. So here we are with ace jack offsuit under the gun. It's not the strongest hand to have under the gun raising, but here we are. We are going to raise this up to $15. And the +2, the hijack, the cutoff, and the button all decide to call. So we are going 5 ways to a flop. But to be honest, it comes out extremely dry. It is 5-5-3, all rainbow cards. So normally this is a spot where you should definitely check. But I just think that is a very good chance that nobody has anything. And if they have nothing, then they'll fold and I win. And if they do have something and I don't get better on the turn, I could probably just check fold or evaluate my hand depending on what comes on the turn. So that being said, I put out a bet of $30 and I actually get everybody to fold. So 4 people calling the $15 raise is $60. After they take out their little bid for the rig, I made about $55 on that hand just from deciding to put out that C bet. So not a bad result. and let's move on. So, have you ever had to battle back and you finally got your stack back up and you're feeling pretty decent now because you're in the positive, but then you get a hand where you just know that you're going to have to put money into the pot? Well, this is what happens here. We have Ace King in the big blind, and the under the gun player decides to raise to $10. Small blind calls, and of course, it's a mandatory raise here. And since I'm in a small blind, I'm going to go 4x plus the dead money. So that is $60 is what we land on. And this $60 bet gets the under the gun player to call and the other player to fold. So we're just going heads up just like I would prefer. And the flop is 8-9-4. So I don't really think that our opponent is going to be too strong here, but they did call a 3-bet, so they could technically have pocket 8s, pocket 9s, or even maybe even 8-9 suited. However, this player is pretty tight, so I don't think that he's opening under the gun with a suited connector. So that being said, I believe that I have the range advantage, so I decide to bet out for $50, and this $50 bet gets him to call, and now the turn is a 6. So now, obviously, this card is way better for him. It connects with a lot of stuff that he could possibly have. So I think that even if I did have aces, this might not always be a spot to bet in. And with ace king, I mean, exploitatively, I just decide to check, and he actually checks around. And the river card is a 7. So now the board reads 6, 7, 8, 9. So any 10 does make a straight. Obviously, I could have all the pocket 10s, ace 10 suited, and things of that nature. However, he could have those same things as well. So I just decided to check, and he checks back pretty quickly, and he has pocket jacks. So I don't really know if I was going to get him to fold pocket jacks on any street. But however, my stack did take a pretty decent hit because of 3-betting to 60 and betting 50 on the flop. So just like that, we was over $100 out of our stack, unfortunately. And that was just when we get back to being into the black. So we're back in the negative. However, you know, it is what it is in poker, but we still have another hand to try to get back. So seeing as that we just lost to pocket jacks, it's only right that we now have them. We have pocket jacks, and we've raised it up to $15. And we get one call, and we are off to a flop, which is 10-7-3. So on this flop, we do have an overpair, and I decided just to put out a small bet of $15. Our opponent quickly decides to call, and we are off to a turn, which is a deuce. Obviously, this doesn't change too much. He could have 3-2, I guess, but I'm going to go for more value. I put out a bet of just $25, and he quickly decides to fold. I do show that I have pocket jacks. I know sometimes people get on me about showing my hands, but I literally make vlogs where I show my cards, and then I talk about my whole thinking process of them. So I don't mind showing my cards at the table because I feel like I play balanced enough where even if you see my hand a bunch of times or if you watch my vlogs, it's going to be different when we're at the table because I'll do the same thing with a bluff or for value. But hey, if you think that you know how I play, just let me know when you want to play. We can schedule a time, go to a table, and you should be able to take all my money. Just let me know. So as we move along to the last hand of this session, we are looking to get some money back. We have king, queen offsuit in the cutoff. So this is going to be a mandatory raise here, and we bump this thing up to $15. And we get the small blind and the hijack to call, so we're going to have possession for the rest of this hand. The flop comes jack 9-3 with 2 hearts. So didn't flop amazing. Right now, all we have is 2 overs and a gut shot to the straight. So that's good enough for me to bet. When they check to me, I decide to bet $20, and only the small blind decides to call. The turn is a 4, so nothing changes on this board. So now I'm going to put max pressure on this turn card in case he has a flush draw. I'm going to put out a bet of $60. And he thinks about it for a second. He does tank for quite a while, but he does decide to call. Now, with this price being a little bit more than most people are expecting on the turn, I'm thinking that he might have some type of combo draw, maybe like queen 10 of hearts, which would be a monster, or maybe a hand like king jack of hearts, something like that, to where he feels like he's still getting a good price. Or he could just have top pair and thinks that I'm just full of it. But anyways, we are off to a river, which comes the king of heart. So it does bring in the flush, and it does bring in queen 10 for the straight. So when he checks, I'm really thinking if I should try to go for thin value here and put out a very large bet, even though I don't mean thin value as in small amount of money. I mean thin value as in my hand strength on this board isn't all that strong, but still going for a bet thing, and I can get called by worse. So as I keep on thinking about it, and the guy tanked for so long, like when the river came, that it made me feel like he was thinking about leading perhaps. So I do end up deciding to check, and I tell him I have a king, but he has king jack. So even though I had him dominate, he ends up making the 2 pair and I river a pair. But good thing is I got away from that hand. But nonetheless, I still did lose quite a little bit of money. So this is going to be the start of a bad run that I've been on, but we will get to the outro to talk more about it. So that's the end of part 1 of the Downswing Blues. I know it doesn't seem like it was that bad, but trust me, in the part 2, it is exponentially worse how bad my luck is. Trust me. In this video, we lost $900. I know it doesn't seem like it's that bad, but in the next video, you'll see in conjunction with today's video. In the next one, you're going to be like, wow. And so many things happen that didn't seem real consecutively, you know? So we'll get into that moving forward in the next video. If you made it to this point, make sure you drop a like. It helps the video. Comment on some of the hands. Hopefully we will make something shake soon and get on an upswing. But as of right now, I'm going to report what actually is happening. So I will see y'all in the next video, which will be Downswings Part 2. And this is where the real disaster is going to begin. So appreciate y'all's support. And until next time, holla.